Welcome back. Now, according to the Credit Bureau Monitor, a large number of South Africans are over indebted. February is National Debt Awareness Month, and with January just behind us, getting out of debt may have made it onto your New Year's resolution list. Is entering debt review a wise means to escape the debt trap? Benay Sager, Executive Head of DebtBusters, joins us with some insight. Benay, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Now, as we get started, let's just talk about the health of the South African consumer. Looking at the data that's compiled by DebtBusters, are consumers rather in a better position than they were a few years ago?
Thank you for having me on the show, firstly. I think the answer to that question is it depends on which consumer groups we're talking about. As is always the case, the detail really matters in this instance. What we find is across the board, the salary increases have not kept pace with inflation, particularly inflation on things that really do matter to us, like electricity, petrol, and the like. Its salary increases haven't kept up. On the other hand, what we find is, as a result of this, people have had to borrow more and more to make ends meet in a way. So what we're finding is, particularly for the highest and lowest earners, there's a heightened sense of financial vulnerability. They seem a bit more exposed in terms of debt to income ratios. But for the middle group, because the lending practices haven't been so prevalent for them, some of them are better than they were a year ago, particularly comparing to 2023. So I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. What we really need to get to a better place for everyone is the growth, of course. Growth in not just the number of employed people, which we desperately need, but also growth in the average salaries that everyone is taking home.
It's interesting to see how, the trends aren't translating in different earnings groups. And I asked the question because, we've had lower inflation, we've had the SARB cut rates, but it doesn't seem like it's filtering through overall, right?
Not yet. I think we will see the impact of those things in 6 to 12 months. But as I'm not an economist, but every single economist will tell us, any change in interest rates is a bit of a blunt instrument. It takes a while to get going. Certainly, we welcome the fact that there has been 3 interest rate cuts in the last 3 cycles. We, that if it were done all at once, that would have been better back in September. But anyway, I think we will still take the 75 basis points decrease. We certainly have seen a lot of people also tap into what's known as the two-pot retirement system since September and using that as an additional cash flow. Of course, the challenge there is that it's not something that's going to be there all the time. So it's a one-off thing. So one needs to treat it and make sure that you replenish that money before you go into retirement. We've also seen positive moves on inflation, as you say. And also, let's not forget load shedding. A year ago, we had load shedding somewhere between 6 to 10 hours a day. And now, even though we had a few days of it in the last week, it's a thing of the past, so to speak. That also provides some relief to the pockets of many businesses, which then translates to individuals. So I think economically, we are in a better shape than we were a year ago. And I think some of those cuts haven't quite yet translated. And I think we have to see debt repayments as a long-term game. It always takes 12 to 24 months. Yeah.
You touched on something quite important there. It was the two-part system and the withdrawals that have been coming through. I'm not sure if you're privy to some of the data of the information and if you know whether we are seeing consumers actually paying off their debt with that money.
Yeah, so what we know from the revenue authorities numbers is about 2 million people have accessed or wanted to access the payments. We do expect that to also go up during the month of February. As you know, it's the last month of the financial year for tax purposes, and we do expect a bit of a rush, so to speak, in February, even though it's been more muted in January. What we are seeing is that a lot of the money is not used for debt repayments, but actually more for urgent needs, predominantly consumption-based, and which is kind of what we always thought. There is a little bit of debt repayment, but it's very, very minor.
So the big issue here is trying to escape the debt trap, right? One of them being through debt review. Just walk me through that process and what it entails.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you find yourself in a difficult situation, or when you think that you're going to be in a difficult situation, you have to assess the options available to you. When we're talking about debt and debt repayments, I think often our people wait a bit too long to really come to terms with the fact that we may be struggling with the repayment of debt. Debt review is designed it's to basically allow individuals who are or about to struggle with repayment of their debt terms to get their debt repayment terms restructured. What does that mean? It means, for the average earner, which we'll see you taking home maybe 15 to 20,000 rands, and you are expected to pay somewhere between 12 to 14,000 rands in terms of debt repayments per month. That is not a sustainable situation, because what we know is often 2/3 of your take-home pay is needed for life, for basic necessities. So what we would then do is, in such a situation, and often is the case that the consumers would owe money to multiple entities. I think we rarely see it's just one bank or one lender. We would, in the debt review situation, if someone formally applies, you would then renegotiate with all the lenders they owe money to come to a longer repayment term. And that's essentially the crux of it. It's a restructuring of debt repayments. It takes somewhere between 3 to 5 years. It's designed to allow you to pay back the most expensive debt, generally the highest interest rate, unsecured loans. It's designed to allow you to pay those as quickly as possible within 5 years, so that you can kind of free yourself up of the most expensive debt. In my opinion, having looked at this, our system in South Africa and comparing it to many other countries, it's the best system available for those who need it. And I think the best way to find out whether you need it and you qualify for it would be to get an assessment done by a debt counselor, and it should be a free assessment, by the way, to understand whether this is an option for you.
So you've highlighted all the pros there. What are some of the cons, including its effects on, let's say, your credit score and your access to credit? I mean, there's also been tons of headlines around debt counselors that are scammers as well.
Yeah, so I think it's important to recognize that debt counseling is designed to allow you to demonstrate that you can pay back the money that you borrowed.
Yeah.
So one of the conditions that comes with that is that while you are in debt counseling, you're not allowed to access new credit. And I think that's a good thing, in the sense that you must demonstrate that you're able to handle your existing finances. So while you're in the system, you will not be able to get new credit. You will not be able to access your credit cards and the like. So, that's one drawback for many people. But the way it's designed is it's almost a necessity for us to be able to demonstrate that happens. The second one is, as we mentioned, access to your credit cards. So some of us are very reliant on them. That won't be possible while you're in the system. I think that you also touched on something that's quite important, that, as a major industry player, we have been very vocal about making sure the standards of new debt counselors, as well as existing debt counselors, the standards of renewal of the registrations must be really, really high, so that ethical practices are prevalent. I think with any other industry where you're attracting, finances, unfortunately, there are some scammers out there. We always continuously warn the public to be very careful about who you're dealing with. That's why it's really important to get a free assessment, before you commit to anything, and take your time to decide. Don't be rushed into anything. If you need 5 days, 10 days, 20 days to decide, you must take that time to decide. This is an important decision. It's probably one of the most important decisions that you're going to make. It's a long-term decision. So I think the consumers must be allowed adequate time to think it over and look at the options.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Benay, thanks so much for joining us today. That was Benay Sager, Executive Head of DebtBusters.